The letter S stands for solve the person. Wait, what am I talking about? Hey, we're continuing our discussion today of the Y.E.S.S.E.S Framework for getting off-market sellers to accept your offers. And in today's episode, we're going to dive deep into the letter S, which stands for solve the person. This is the most unique part of our entire process as thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs. So let's cue up the theme song and we're going to dive right into it.
Welcome to Racking Up Rentals, a show about how regular people, those of us without huge war chests of capital or insider connections, can build lasting wealth acquiring a portfolio of buy and hold real estate. But we don't just go mainstream looking at what's on the market and asking banks for loans, nor are we posting "We Buy Houses" signs or just looking for, quote, motivated sellers to make lowball offers to. You see, we are people-oriented deal makers. We sit down directly with sellers to work out win-win deals without agents or any other obstacles and buy properties nobody else even knows are for sale. I'm Jeff from the Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur. If you're the kind of real estate investor who wants long-term wealth, not get-rich-quick gimmicks or pictures of yourself holding fat checks on social media, this show is for you. Join me and quietly become the wealthiest person on your block. Now let's go rack up a rental portfolio.
Hey, thanks for joining me for another episode of Racking Up Rentals. Show notes for today's episode can be found at www.thoughtfulre.com/E47. Please do us a big favor by hitting that big subscribe button in your podcast app. It really does help us. It helps other thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs who are looking for content just like this to find us by iTunes knowing that you have subscribed to the show. Thank you so much for that. All right, onward with today's episode. So today we're going to talk about the letter S. And no, this isn't Sesame Street, but we are going through a 6-letter framework called the Y.E.S.S.E.S Framework for getting off-market sellers to accept your leads. Now, if you haven't heard the last 2 or 3 episodes, I'd really recommend that you go back and you listen to those because these are cumulative as we go through first a big picture of the Y.E.S.S.E.S Framework, but then letter by letter. And today we get to the third of 6 letters, the letter S, which stands for solve the person. You know what I would recommend you do is go over to yes.thoughtfulre.com and you can download a PDF version of the whole Y.E.S.S.E.S framework. So you've got it handy and you can refer to it anytime. So head over to yes.thoughtfulre.com, download your free copy. It just takes a second and we'll go from there. A super quick recap of the Y.E.S.S.E.S framework goes like this. Y stands for you. E stands for engage thoughtfully. That was our last episode. S stands for solve the person. That's what we're going to talk about today. S stands for solve the deal. E stands for empathetic proposal. And the final S stands for sharpen and agree. And today we're going to dive deep into the first S, solve the person. So here's where we are in the framework. We have decided what we really want to accomplish and what our objectives and our investment philosophy are. And then we've, as a result, figured out who are the people who own the properties that we'd like to buy, and these are the people we need to reach out to. Then in the letter E, we did exactly that. We reached out to them, and we engaged with them thoughtfully. We sent them our marketing, which we carefully thought about the right way to do that. And then they started calling, and we did an intake of those leads, and we started to develop rapport, and we went to their house and started to understand the situation, who we're working with, and what the opportunities are. And that leads us to S, which is for solve the person. We're now really trying to start putting a deal together. But this is the part where what we do as thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs is really so different. Everybody else really kind of in the mainstream in real estate investing market and education, they just want to dive right in to trying to figure out the deal, to structuring the deal, to solving the deal. Well, we solve the deal, but we solve the person before we solve the deal. And that's such a critical part of the Y.E.S.S.E.S framework and how we operate as thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs. We need to slow down and we need to focus on the humans involved because we can't buy properties unless we get a yes from a human. And we certainly can't buy properties in unique ways, like with creative deal structures or with seller financing, unless we get a yes from an actual human being. There's always human beings on the other side of a real estate transaction. It's just that when we're buying properties that are on the market and things like that, we never really get a chance to experience that other human. There's so many intermediaries and things standing in our way. But in this case, we are talking directly to the actual person. And so we have the opportunity to understand the actual human being behind the deal. It's really important to note, too, that we need to just slow down. There's no hurry here at all. Another thing that's so common in traditional real estate investing education is to quickly vet a deal, an opportunity, ask questions, cut right to the chase, get right to the point, because if this thing's going nowhere, you want to cut bait and run as fast as possible. And I kind of understand that. You don't want to spend a lot of time being wasted on leads that aren't going anywhere. But the paradox of this, the exact flip side, is that you will never really know if a deal can go somewhere until you've understood the human. And you can't understand a human by just walking in and making a snap judgment or trying to rush the process. We call this slow dancing. We're slow dancing with the seller, and that's okay. It'll take as long as it's going to take. So let's talk first about understanding people. We want to understand the seller, but what does that really mean? It means we need to really understand their opinions about things, their worldview about the world as a whole, but about real estate, about their market, about their town, about the political climate, the environment, the economic climate, etc. How do they perceive these things? And then we ultimately will get to what I call the one big thing. The one big thing is the single most important topic, factor, criteria, deciding element for the seller. It's the one hill that they will die on, so to speak. It's the one thing that, even if there's like 10 things on their mind, the one thing that if this doesn't get met, nothing else will happen. One thing is always more important than everything else. And our job as excellent, thoughtful real estate entrepreneur buyers is to develop rapport with people to the point that we understand what their one big thing is, because the one big thing is the key to unlocking the deal. But I want to emphasize that their opinions, their perspectives are what matter. We're not trying to compare ours to them or ours to theirs. We're not trying to debate theirs. We just want to uncover those things. And I want to really point out there's a massive difference between information and insights. And actually, we have a whole episode on this. It's episode number 27, if you want to go back and listen to that again. Information is data. Information would be things like, is the property rented? What are the rents? What's the square footage? How long has the roof been there? All that kind of stuff. And that stuff's important for what we do. However, what's more important than information at this point is insights. Insights versus information. What are insights compared to information? Information is these data points. Insights is little nuggets of our understanding about the other person, how they think, how they feel, all of that. And insights are ultimately more valuable than information. I want to give you two quick examples of this. A couple years ago, I got a call on one of my letters, of course, from a seller, and her name was Dusty. And I went to meet Dusty after I'd spoken with her on the phone for a few minutes. One of the first things Dusty said on the phone to me was, she was kind of trying to brace me. She said, I want to sell this property because I just had some renters in there and they just did a terrible job. They did not meet my expectations. It's just, I'm done being a landlord. I'm tired of being disappointed by people. And I said, okay. She said, I'll meet you. I'd like to meet you over there and show it to you because I'm kind of worried, but just brace yourself. It's not perfect. I'm like, okay, all right, I understand. So I show up at the meeting with her, and I am kind of just naturally assuming that my idea of what she means is the same as her idea of what she means. Like tenants have taken bad care of a property. She's painted that picture. I have my idea of what that means. And I show up at the property and she kind of looks at me kind of embarrassed. And she's like, okay, let's go in. And we open the door and I'm looking around going, what? This place is fine. Like we could make a few small improvements, sure, here and there, but this is nothing major at all. And what I realized at that moment is that I needed to gain this insight, and I had to realize that I was making an assumption that her idea of what was terrible and erect was going to be the same thing as mine. And it turns out it wasn't at all. And that gave me a huge, huge insight into her, what her perspective on these things is, what her level of expectations is, what her standards are. And that gave me all the fodder I needed to make a great proposal to her that played into her, her belief system that this property was not in good shape and that she shouldn't be a landlord anymore. So I was able to kind of run with that and use these beliefs that she shared with me and that I now understood about her to create a proposal that would work really well for her. I'll give you another example. A seller I've had a while back, and I've had several sellers like this over the years too, but in our market, landlord-tenant law has evolved a lot, and it's become a lot more tenant-friendly. And this seller, it made it very clear through his remarks that he felt like landlord-tenant law meant that those changes meant that our market and the prospects of being a landlord were just going to heck in a handbasket, and that it was like a calamity and the worst thing ever. He then also kind of made some assumptive comments about how, the current administration obviously were a bunch of idiots, and he would not contribute to the funding of that administration by paying capital gains taxes. So I just am standing there. I'm taking it all in. I'm not judging his comments. I'm not comparing his thoughts to my thoughts. I'm not telling him what my thoughts are at all. I'm just taking it in, and I'm understanding this guy feels like the sky is falling when it comes to being a landlord, and he sure as heck is not going to be paying capital gains. Those are his perspectives, and that's all I need. I need to understand what his perspectives are so that when I go back to him and I make him a proposal and I say, look, sir, I know you're right. It's becoming extremely difficult being a landlord. Luckily, I'm young and got lots of energy, and I'm willing to put up with that brain damage. But I understand you aren't. And so I'd like to make a proposal to buy your property with an installment sale. And this installment sale is going to allow you to get this property off your hands and off your mind and get out of the business of trying to keep up with the daily changes in landlord-tenant law. But it's going to defer your capital gains too through this structure. And let me explain that to you. And I was able to position what I wanted in terms of what he wanted because I understood the person. I solved the person before I tried to solve the deal. So as we're at this step of solving the person, of course, we're really focused on building a relationship with them. We've already established rapport really in the E step, engaging thoughtfully, but now we're working on truly building a relationship with them. And it's really important that you sense and feel their level of eagerness, their level of energy, and then mirror that. Nothing would be more likely to raise red flags than if they were pretty calm and slow and wanting to ease into this relationship and you just showed up and you're like, great, I need to make you an offer right now. They would sense that, and that would be a major disconnect. On the other hand, the exact opposite could be true, right? If they are expressing that they are ready to take care of this now, but you're kind of dragging your feet trying to slow it down artificially just so you can have more time to build a relationship, they might pick up on that too. So we call it slow dancing, but you really kind of want to dance with the seller at the speed and the tempo that they set. Secondly, you really want to ask good questions. So you might ask me, well, what defines a good question? Well, a good question, I would say, is one that is likely to uncover those insights. Not so much information. Information's good too. You're going to want to take note of that. But questions that uncover insights, qualitative questions. How do you feel about this topic? What was your experience when this happened? And those types of things. And it's really important, really, really important. And this is going to sound obvious, but I will tell you it is not as common as it seems like it should be. You need to be listening very, very closely to what they say. And I don't mean taking notes and writing down everything they say or recording it, transcribing it. You just need to be listening. Because if you're listening, you will pick up on the information, of course. You're going to need to remember that they said the rent was $1,650. But if you're going to listen, you're going to be able to pick up things where you're reading between the lines, right? They say they feel XYZ about this topic. They feel ABC about this topic. And you can pick up on the vibe of what they're really saying and read between the lines of that. And that's where your insights come from. As you're asking them these questions and having this conversation, it's also very important that it feels conversational. It should feel natural. It should not feel like an interrogation. Don't show up with a clipboard with 30 questions in a particular order and you say, okay, question number 7, all right, the answer is this, great. Number 8, blah, blah, blah. Don't do that. Have a conversation. Conduct yourself like, again, a regular person having a conversation with a regular person. And listen and focus and remember what they said so that you can understand the person as best as you possibly can. And lastly, but certainly not least, is we need to simply find out what would be a win for the seller. What would be the thing that just would make them as happy as possible? And this is actually a question you can ask a little bit more directly. You ask blue sky questions like, hey, if this all worked out exactly as you have been dreaming about, what does that look like? Tell me. I'd like to understand what we're shooting for, ideally. So if you can do those things, you can build that relationship, conversationally ask good questions, and for crying out loud, listen to what they're saying and understand what they're really getting at. And know when you leave that meeting or this series of meetings, as it might be, solving the person might take several steps, several meetings. Progressively understanding what would be a win for them, you're going to set yourself up great for the next step, which is the second S, solving the deal. And that's what we're going to dive into in the next episode. So that is the first S in the Y.E.S.S.E.S Framework, and that wraps up today's episode of Racking Up Rentals. So again, show notes for today's episode are at thoughtfulre.com/E47 for episode 47. Please do us a massive favor by hitting that subscribe button in the podcast app right this second, please. If you would also be so kind, just rate and review the show. iTunes and the other podcast platforms just like to know that people are listening, and ratings and reviews let the platforms know that that's exactly what's happening. If you don't know already, you should head over to join our Facebook group. It's free for thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs. It's called Rental Portfolio Wealth Builders. We'd love to have you join us there. So it's just go to group.thoughtfulre.com and it'll take you right there. Last but not least, if you liked this episode and you're listening on your phone, take a screenshot of it real quick and then post that screenshot to Instagram and be sure to tag us. We are at Thoughtful Real Estate. It's all spelled out. And that too will help spread the word for the great content that you are enjoying here as well. I will see you in the next episode. We'll keep diving into the Y.E.S.S.E.S Framework. And until then, this is Jeff from the Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur signing off.
Thanks for listening to Racking Up Rentals, where we build long-term wealth by being win-win deal makers. Remember, solve the person to unlock the deal and solve the financing to unlock the profits.